Hello and welcome back to Random Librarian on YouTube. Today we are going to be talking about Lily Barlow and the Mystery of Jane Doe, which is written by Carla Verget. So this is one of the books that I talked about a little bit in my advanced reader copy slash book haul of books that I got at the American Library Association conference earlier this summer. The book itself is 18 chapters over 395 pages. And I'm just going to read the rundown on the back before we get into any other kind of reviews. So the author describes her oeuvre as Lily Barlow, a quirky college student obsessed with the fictional bounty hunter Stephanie Plum, is called home from the University of Virginia to get the family bakery running after her dad's heart attack. Stuck in a sinkhole of self-pity, she finds her sleepy hometown. Well, can a town actually be in a coma? No worries. All she needs to do is hire a bakery manager, and she's not even moving back in with her family for that part. Instead, she rents an efficiency garage apartment from Miss Delphine Walker, an old woman who Lily begins to believe may have killed someone at some point in time. Meanwhile, Lily's overactive imagination takes a swan dive when she discovers an online clearinghouse for victims the cops can't identify. Consumed with the profiles on the website, Miss Delphine and the candidates for the bakery manager position, she simply cannot cope with one more problem. So when Jack Turner, her best friend since kindergarten, reveals out of nowhere that he wants something more than friendship, what's a woman to do? So then I'm going to just read I don't normally read the author bios, but I think this does lend a little something to the understanding of the book. So Carla Verget has been writing this book, albeit in her head, since her undergraduate days at North Carolina State University. From there, without writing a word of the story, she worked in fundraising, got a master's at George Mason University, taught special education for several years, and finally, after all this time, wrote a book. For fun, she and her husband drive jeeps, off-road, camp, and grow organic vegetables. They have 2 dogs, Booker and Marble, who keep things interesting. Carla suffers from TMA, toasted marshmallow addiction, and she heads up a spider relocation program, meaning she habitually moves spiders and other bugs out of harm's way. So, let me read a few Goodreads things to you before I get really into my thoughts on everything that's going on here. So on Goodreads, Lily Barlow, The Mystery of Jane Doe, has a 4.33 star rating. It has 30 ratings and 21 written reviews. So I'm gonna read a couple of the ones that I really agreed with. There are a handful of 5-star reviews of people who are really excited about this book, thought it was a really fun read, didn't have really anything negative to say about it, but I'm gonna read the ones that I more agreed with. So the first one that I'm gonna read is from Kate, and she gave it 3 stars. Kate says, I read this book in less than 2 days. It's a romance, cozy mystery. It's a little long for the genre, and it feels that way at times. Some of it is because there are spare storylines that don't need to exist or are never resolved, although this doesn't feel like a series. Some of it is also because the editor could have done with a little more editing. That said, the main characters are likable and the storyline is different and not predictable. I do wish that her love of Stephanie Plum had been explored more. Instead, it felt more like a repeated throwaway line, but I don't think that was the intent. Would I recommend reading it? No. Do I regret reading it? No. P.S. I agree that "for the love of" line was used way too much. Another one that I'm going to read is from Don. I'm not going to read the whole review. He gave it 5 stars, but the thing that I agreed with from his review is that Lily, and then this is what he says, really lets Jack lead her around, and he ended up on my not favorite list. I have some issues with that because it's not her fault that he's pushy, but we're going to talk about that later. Their relationship was a lot. And then the last thing that I'm going to kind of make reference to is from Catrice Nelson. She gave it a 3.5 rating, kind of in her own system, but it's 3 stars on Goodreads itself. She says, I wanted to love this book so bad. I've been a huge fan of the Stephanie Plum series forever, but it's getting pretty repetitive, so I've been looking for something to fill that void. This book had so much potential to be that. I tried to relate to Lily because she is more of a tomboy, klutzy type, but the love story between Lily and Jake, she means Jack, was literally driving me nuts. This book could have easily been cut short by 100 pages or so if some of the boring relationship scenes would have been left out. It seemed like it was just the same interaction between them over and over again. Then just some of the writing left me shaking my head. The writer definitely overused the phrase "for the love of," da, 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 and then would fill it in with just random sayings that made no sense or that anyone had heard of. So she says 3.5 stars out of 5 because the plot was good and could have been great, but it just fell really flat for me. That's the one that like really hit home for me. So I did a trigger warning that was a little bit more serious for A Tale for the Time Being, which was the last review that I did. But for this book, I have kind of a half-joking one, but it is something that drives me insane when it's in books, so I hope it might help somebody else. My trigger warning for this is Not Like Other Girls syndrome. So I'll get more into the Jack and Lily saga later. I know I've said that already in this review, but it deserves its own huge section. The way both Lily and Jack talk about Jack's past relationships and like their relation to Lily made me so angry. It was It starts off fine because Lily's describing like a mutual friend of theirs, Mercedes, who is her only female friend, or like her only like fleshed out female friend. So on page 12, so like we jump right in, she describes Mercedes as precisely his type, naturally beautiful, good with makeup, huge boobs. It didn't last long though. I made her swear she wouldn't create any weirdness that would impact my friendship with Jack. He was special to me. And then she says also, they hadn't dated long before she broke it off, explaining to me that she didn't see it going anywhere, so having sex would be pointless. So like that's fine, but it's also like a weird way of being like, no, I can still be friends with her because like she hasn't slept with the guy that I'm definitely gonna end up being with in this book. Like we're on page 12 and it's already very aggressively foreshadowed. And then it's also followed immediately afterwards, like Lily and Mercedes get plastered and someone texts Jack, someone at the restaurant where they are texts Jack to come and get her. Everyone is always texting him about her too. It's so annoying. It's like Jack is so set on them being a couple, and then everyone in the town is just like, yeah, I guess that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna support him in like controlling her entire life. So someone texts Jack and she's super drunk and she somehow she's like, yeah, we've been friends for a really long time, like 16 years. Why haven't we had sex? Men and women can be friends. I don't know why romance novels think that that is not the case. Value your friendship for what it is, not like what it could be. Ugh, it just drives me insane. Oh, he also responds to her asking like, why haven't they had sex, with we haven't had sex yet, and his yet is italicized, and she like doesn't remember this conversation the next day, but ugh, gross. So that, like, back to the Not Like Other Girls syndrome. That one, it doesn't start out too bad, but then, and then there are a few other times when she describes them just like as beauty queens or like something like that, just saying that they're pretty. She talks about their boobs a lot, but then this next part, and keep in mind that her only female friend falls under this category of women who have dated Jack. Like that, just keep it in mind. She says, any amateur could recognize a common thread among the women he dated. Let's see. Most couldn't make toast, so he wasn't stopping by for their fried chicken. Most couldn't talk about anything besides hairspray or high heels, so it wasn't for their titillating conversations. Most didn't know that water was wet, so it wasn't for their intellect. Nope, it was pretty basic. They all had huge boobs and slinky bodies and knew how to use them. Jesus Christ, what? Who thinks that way? Who writes that way? Who categorizes other women that way? Especially if they relate to your friend. I almost threw the book out the window at that point. So, you know, take that as you will. Like, take that and run with it. That's all I'm gonna say about that section. I could say way more. There is a rant in there somewhere, but this would go on way too long if I let myself have that rant. So, do I recommend it? It's a hard question because I don't like romance novels. I was originally so excited for this book because the romance line is like, or the romance storyline is not introduced until here. So it's the last sentence of like a 3-paragraph summary of the book. So I didn't think it was going to be as prevalent as it was. So I feel like I can't really be fair. And I know that this book has its audience. It's been shown by the 5-star reviews on Goodreads, and a lot of people do like that kind of cozy mystery style of book. I've never tried one. I'm not sure that I will now. Plus, I met the author in person in DC, and she clearly poured her heart and soul into this. Like, even on the back, with the way that she describes it, like, I almost feel like maybe this was her way of fictionalizing, like, her and her husband's relationship, or, like, the relationship that she wanted in college. But it clearly means like so much to her. So that also makes me feel guilty about giving it like a negative review and telling you not to read it. I wanted to like it so much more than I did. Basically, if you think that this is something that you would want to read, go do it and stop this video right now, because I'm gonna get into rant mode in like this next section upcoming, and it will have a lot of spoilers. So I hope this book finds its audience, and I hope that the author finds her like reading tribe or whatever we're calling it these days, but it's not for me, and I'll leave it at that. I'm gonna structure my thoughts by the things that are mentioned on the back, and I'll leave Jack and Lily for the end because it's the largest part of this review. So she goes home because her dad has a heart attack. She hates their family business and apparently like constantly burns herself if she's in the kitchen. So she and Mercedes are kind of presented as foils of one another. Lily is the tomboy version, but Mercedes is like the hot, sexy, exotic one. Lily and Mercedes, both of their mothers are not in the picture. Lily's mom dies. Mercedes' mom either gets deported or like walks out on them, or like there's something weird about that, and like I don't know. But Lily hates their family business, and Mercedes dove right into her family business. Like, she works at her dad's restaurant, she basically runs it, she's really good at everything like for the business. So there's that. So Lily doesn't want it to seem like she's coming back to town to stay. She has like a couple of weeks. This entire book takes place over like, I think 3 weeks. And yeah. So she thinks she's gonna find a manager within those 3 weeks, and she wanted to rent on like a week-by-week basis with her landlady, which is weird. So she gets an apartment because she doesn't want to seem like she's coming home. That's kind of explained on the back. And she rents from a woman called Miss Delphine Walker, who has the opening line of the book. So she says, "Nothing satisfies the murderous intentions of the human heart like ripping a weed from the very earth." And she has a couple of these lines that are just like almost trying too hard to make her seem like a villain. But despite that, I actually love her character. She's spunky and fun. I usually hate it when like the main character rolls up and immediately finds like the perfect apartment and like somehow doesn't have to pay for it, or like has to pay pennies for it. Like that, it always just like kicks me right out of a story, because I live in Boston, and if you live in a shoebox in Boston, it will probably cost you $1,000 a month. Like it makes me upset how unrealistic that is. The reason that it doesn't bug me in this one is that Delphine keeps mentioning Lily's mom, and like Lily never really talks about her mom with her dad, because after his wife died, her dad gave up a lot of things because they were too painful. Like he doesn't cook her, or he doesn't bake her favorite recipes. I'm sure that there are other examples that I can think of right now, but I'm almost wondering if Delphine was a family friend or even related to them, and that contact was kind of cut off because it was too painful. Like in my mind, she's Lily's godmother, and I think that could be valid. And it makes me feel better about Delphine's character and like the plot hole of Lily not paying for rent. But she also kind of gives Lily a lot of shit. So her part of the story is actually pretty delightful. She pokes fun at Lily, who for some reason has this inexplicable fear of chickens. Miss Delphine, the one thing she asks her to do while she's not paying for rent is to feed the chickens, and like we have multiple scenes of Lily just like being bad at that and like freaking out because there's a chicken at like the base of her stairs, like fighting it with a broom and dumping the food in one spot, which is like, I've never owned chickens, and I know that that's wrong. Like, I think she's supposed to have grown up in this kind of like rural environment, and she's doesn't fit like at all. She's scared of the chickens. She's scared of like all these bugs and like all of these other random fears that feel very at odds with her being like, no, I'm like this independent woman, like I can live anywhere, like I lived in these scary places. And then she talks about this one apartment that she left because there were ants, and she like ran screaming from the door, and I don't think she even went back and got any of her stuff. And it's like I'm all for dichotomies, but that's a weird one. So sorry, Miss Delphine. She might have murdered someone, is what we think. Lily sees her with like a wheelbarrow full of misshapen trash bags and like burying them in the backyard. But she's somehow like easily distracted from that very troubling behavior. Like Lily, she wants to be like this detective like Stephanie Plum, who I've never read any of those books either, but you don't really need to know who that is to understand her reference in the story. So she doesn't call the cops. She doesn't like even ask that many questions about it. She just gets nervous about it and then leaves and like forgets about it until the next time we see some like weird behavior happening. And then she doesn't actually like figure it out until the very end. And it's it had to kind of end this way, but it was funny. She like has big old trash bags full of like coffee grounds and puts them into the dirt, and then like takes the bag out so that the coffee grounds integrate with the dirt itself, which is good for worms, which is good for your soil, which helps her because her garden is prize winning. So it makes sense, but it's just, if it had actually been body parts, Lily would have been so screwed. She would have been dead. It would have been an ending to this book, and I wouldn't have seen it coming, so, you know, take that as you will. So then she needs to find a bakery manager, which I mentioned, which they mentioned on the back, and that's kind of like the main plot point, really, for like the hometown part. And these interviews they're just full of a host of characters. No one actually seems like they'd be a good person for the job. There's like people with allergies, someone shows up drunk, there's someone who like thought it was for like a magazine shoot, so it's like a model shows up and Lily spends like a full page just being like in awe of her beauty. One person who applies has not showered for like 2 years because he's worried about chemicals in soap. It's just like a lot of people who should not be allowed to work with food. So that probably could have been shortened, but they're fun. It's like fine. Then Lily ends up giving the job to Mercedes because Mercedes is actually qualified for it. So then there's the DO network, which is the online clearinghouse for unidentified victims. So this is a real thing to help, or try to help, in homicide cases. And Lily gets obsessed with the site in general at first, and then one specific victim who reminds Lily of the one woman that she has been with sexually. So I'm just gonna read out that part. So they meet at a music festival. She says, The first night sitting around a campfire, I saw a woman across from me. Over the course of an hour, an inexplicable force pulled us toward each other. She called it sideways gravity. Her name was Story Sanders. Story is spelled S-T-O-R-I-E. She was a hiker, drifter, hippie, gypsy with long blonde hair and 2 thick braids. She wore a thin, moss green knit hat. The ties that held her braids were decorated with tiny silver charms that made the purest, softest sound when she moved. She wore bracelets, lots of bracelets. Leather, silver, beaded string. Her eyes glowed like the picture of that Afghan girl from the cover of National Geographic. She wore a flimsy skirt down to her ankles and a gauzy tank top without a bra. Obsession with boobs. There was some kind of cosmic energy between us, and we spent that night, the next night, and half of Sunday together. I've never been interested in or even curious about a physical relationship with a woman, but we did everything I never knew I wanted to try, knowing it wouldn't last longer than the music festival. She was hiking the Appalachian Trail with a few companions, and when the festival broke up on Sunday, we kissed goodbye. She hiked south, and I went back to school with a new interpretation of myself as a sexual being. I wish that was the, the love story of the book, but fine. Lily thinks that Story is dead and decapitated and on this website based on the picture of a tattoo that is still intact on a murder victim's ankle. So she goes about trying to find Story, and as she gets more and more certain that Story is murdered, she goes about trying to find Story's family to tell them that their daughter has been killed and dismembered. And I get that this is fiction and that is kind of the driving point of this narrative, but do not do this. Do not. Ever. If you think you have something that could help identify a murder victim or help in a case, you have to go to the cops because they're actually trained in following up on these kind of things and in how to break the news to a family. Lily is super not trained to do that. She doesn't even have a plan on how she's gonna do that. She ends up going and finding Story's family farm. And then it turns out that Story is not dead. So she has matching tattoos with friends from high school, and then she ends up being super traumatized by this woman that she had a weekend fling with, who then stalked her and gave her the worst news of her life. That's how this story wraps up. It's bananas to me. Lily made every bad choice there. And then there's Jack. I know this is supposed to be that best friends, 2 lovers fantasy of people end up with their soulmate who was platonic at first, but now it's their romantic soulmate and they know each other better than anyone else in the whole world and it's all beautiful and everything is great. But the way that Jack is written is my actual worst nightmare. It could not be worse. So she drunkenly tells him that she maybe wants to have sex with him, and he immediately turns every single conversation that they have into something sexual. All of these bookmarks that I put in here are moments where I either cringed, rolled my eyes. I could not stop myself from rolling my eyes. I tried to just power through it, and they were just rolling in my head by themselves. And there were also moments when I literally had to speak out loud and be no, that's not at all what's going on here. For most of these things, he'll box her in, and she gets so uncomfortable that she tries to put things between them, or gets up and walks around behind another chair so that an entire living room is between them. She literally leaves and is I have to pee, and runs to the bathroom, which is always a good strategy. Usually better if you can bring a female friend with you to the bathroom, because I would not be surprised if Jack was just waiting outside. And while this is happening, he's no, I have to keep forcing you into these situations so that you get used to our inevitable relationship. It's no, if she's uncomfortable, you back off. That's it. Bottom line. Same thing if it's the dude who's uncomfortable. if one person in a friendship is uncomfortable, the other one needs to stop doing what they're doing that's making them uncomfortable. Like, that's it. You don't get to force someone to be in a relationship with you. So he's telling her about like how when he like first started being attracted to her, and that's when Lily goes into this like reflection about Story and how they met and all this stuff, and he's like, don't know where you went just now, he said, but it seems like you enjoyed it. I might know what caused the change you noticed. I'm listening. Remember when you said you didn't think I was ready for everything you had to tell me? Well, I'm not sure you're ready for this. Oh, I've never been more ready for anything. Their conversations are so unrealistic also. They're very... Ugh. Anyways, she goes, I licked my lips, cleared my throat, and took a step off what felt like a very high cliff. I had sex with it. Well, it was, well, a woman. By way of trying to offer some sort of meaningful explanation, I added, who was a complete stranger I met at Backroads, the music festival. Jack looked like he just suffered a blow to the head, resulting in a concussion. I'm not sure I could have manufactured a sentence that would have culminated in more stars and birds circling his head than the truth I'd just revealed. The only thing that broke through the stunned silence was a tiny curve of the lips. Jack, I said. He didn't answer, just continued to hold me in a locked gaze that started to feel uncomfortable. So, I stammered, that may have been the reason for the change you noticed. Oh, I guarantee it, he said. The tiny curve had developed into a full-fledged smile, but he still seemed stuck in the initial image. Well, I said, desperate for anything to move the conversation forward. Mystery solved, I guess. Not so fast, he stopped me. I'm gonna need more details. I'm having a hard time putting these pieces together. And I doubt that it was intended this way, but I hate that she used the character's like sexuality as a way of making her more attractive to the male love interest, who I don't like anyways. So it was just such a flop of a conversation. And then they have this weird like truth or dare thing where he gets to ask her like really invasive questions about her like weekend with Story, and when she like backs out of telling him part of the story, he gets to be like, oh well, now you have to do a dare, and he leans in and like I think kisses her neck, and then from there becomes like really obsessed with the soap that she uses, and apparently she smells like oranges, and that comes up like way too often. Like at one point way later in the book, someone who is like just his type is their waitress at a restaurant and like gives him her number, and Lily is like half feeling jealous, half being like, oh my god, like go after her, don't stay with me, like Jesus Christ. And Jack is like, no, she's the old type, the new type smells like oranges. Like, what? Anyways, I'm not gonna read all of these because they get like weirdly and like super randomly sexual. Like it's not even like something that anyone would ever say. It's just strange. But yeah, he keeps trying to force her to do things. He calls it the principle of proximity so that she can expand her comfort zone to include him and all of his like desire to have sex and apparently have a relationship, though like the sex comes up way more often than them being together. There's just one part, or I think maybe two things that I had like actually starred because they made me more uncomfortable than anything else in the book. So this is the first thing I starred because it was just like really like perfectly stated the problems I have with how he is approaching trying to have a relationship with her. So she wakes up, they're holding hands in the middle of the bed, and he's been awake for a while but is like kind of half pretending to be asleep or like just rest his eyes or whatever, and she goes, hey, and like is about to start backpedaling, being like, I don't want to kiss you, like I don't want to have a relationship with you, she wants to like take it back, like anything that they did the night before, like conversation wise or making out. Before I could start backpedaling, he laid out his argument. Lily, don't pick it to pieces. Something awesome happened last night. We're still going slow. Wow. It was like he knew I was preparing to erect a good old-fashioned rampart complete with parapet, which, of course, I was. Harder now after I fell for the whole lip lock thing and regrettably liked it. That'll hurt me. But I was a professional backer-outer of uncomfortable situations. I just had to rally to the purpose and stay the course. Here's the thing, Jack, I started, but he interrupted me. No, he said a little more forcefully. Here's the thing, Lily. I refuse to accept your refusal to accept the possibility that our friendship has relationship potential. Don't try to dilute what happened last night, just enjoy the feeling. I am. And I'm looking forward to the next experience, whatever and whenever that is. So this is a conversation that happens like multiple times in different ways throughout the whole thing. Like he'll do something, she'll be uncomfortable. He's like, we're not gonna do anything that makes you uncomfortable. And then kind of continues to push it, which is like not how that works. They like made out a little bit and then she is out of breath, a little dizzy and suddenly wobbly in the knees. So she goes, I lost my nerve and subsequently started to hyperventilate. Easy now, he murmured. I know you're not ready for this. Nothing happens till you're ready, remember? I nodded, unconvinced, trying to get my lungs to accept even a small amount of air. Slow down, he said, deep breaths. Jack, I'm having this physical reaction. I struggled to talk before I could breathe, but it doesn't match up. You can tell me about it when you catch your breath. Shh. His voice sounded soft and low in my ear. Deep breaths. In. He waited as I inhaled, then said, out. She is literally having a panic attack. And he doesn't back off. So that was one thing that obviously pissed me off. Like, he's supposed to be her best friend and this is how he treats her, and it's so, I hate it so much. Especially because they compare Jack to like people that she's dated in the past, and she says that he's more of a doer, not a sayer, and that like other people like brag about stuff and he doesn't. And then there's this other guy who she thinks might have killed Story. His nickname is Ditch. Lily guesses you like to do it in a ditch, which, how is that anyone's oh my god, Lily. And then they have like a thing back and forth and he says I fuck him and I ditch him. Alright, so I've gone and had some food, so maybe the rest of this won't be quite so Anyways, so back to Ditch. Jack isn't there, but he sends his older brother along with her, which is also a weird and like thing going on. So the way she starts describing him is this: a cape of disappointment lay across my shoulders as a cloud of doom gathered above my head. I didn't like Ditch Miller, and I didn't like that Story was into him. She was way too good for a jerk like that. So was I, for that matter. The cloud of doom came from the realization that he thought he had a chance with me. That's the kind of guy who would push himself on a woman. Is that what happened to Story? She thought she'd blah 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 blah. Did he kill her? All that other stuff. That's the kind of guy who will push himself on a woman. Honey, there are hundreds of pages of Jack pushing himself on you. It's just a lot. And then there's like one thing where she is like questioning in her own head. She's like, oh, I wonder why Jack didn't just like so she's just like reflecting in her own mind, like, I wonder why Jack didn't jump on the chances I was giving him when I was drunk, like that we could hook up. And she says he could have easily had sex with me. In almost every conversation he alluded to it. It would have eliminated virtually all the complications to do it and just be done with it. We could have chalked it up to a couple beers, a stupid decision, and the open window of opportunity. Once it was out of the way, I would activate my standard state of denial and refuse to discuss it. Eventually, it would disappear from the topographical map of our friendship. So why didn't he do it? Yeah, the whole taking advantage song and dance. I gave a nod to his parents for raising him to have principles. He was still an obnoxiously persistent totalitarian, but the boy had principles nonetheless. That is the lowest bar. He didn't date rape her, and she's like, oh, he's such a good boy. So I guess there's just one last thing that struck me as kind of weird. So there are repeated instances where the author seems to not trust the reader, not trust her own writing, or both. She feels the need to tell us when characters are being sincere. Like, someone will say something and then she'll say, oh, and you could feel how sincere they were, like, sincere, blah, blah, blah. Sincere comes up a lot. Like, everyone is being very sincere with each other all the time when they're not giving each other shit. And it's just, like, I feel like sincerity is not a word that you're supposed to say. It's supposed to be felt, whether that's in writing or when you're actually speaking with someone. So that kind of bugged me. And then there's also this weird section when Lily is with her high school friends at a lake and she thinks, I scanned the group of my friends, enjoying the diverse mix of white, black, and Hispanic. That kind of multiculturalism wasn't something you typically expected in a small Virginia town, but somehow this group achieved it. I wish she had, like, actually let us meet some of these friends, because, like, the ones we do meet are, like, who you would expect from a small Virginia town. Like, they go off-roading in a Jeep, and, like, we meet Mercedes, and, like, she's Hispanic, but we don't meet anyone else, whether they're white, black, or Hispanic. Like, we just have the people in the trucks. We have Jack the firefighter and Lily, the baker's daughter, who's away at college and doesn't want to actually live in her small town. Like, those are characters that you're expecting to meet in, like, a small town mystery kind of novel. I would have loved to know more about her different friends. She does describe one of them in, like, a super weird way, but she claims that he is describing himself this way. But he's not a real person. He's created by the author, and the author is also in Lily's head. So, like, it's weird. She said, plus Larry, who coined the phrase Reskimo to describe his heritage, redneck Eskimo. And then it goes into, like, that kind of multiculturalism, blah, blah, blah. Which just feels like a heavy-handed way for the author to give us the message, like, don't worry, like, the main character that I want you to identify with, she's inclusive, and it's just weird. Like, they're things that should be shown, not said. So, I mean, I don't... Like I said before, I think that there are people out there who will love it, and no shade to them at all, but it is very much not my cup of tea. There's just, it checked off a lot of pet peeves for me when it comes to reading and writing. I literally almost didn't finish this one because it was getting to me a lot. And I finally was like, you know what, I'm gonna finish it just so I can make this video and put it up and be done with it. So those are all of my thoughts. That is where my brain is at, and please let me know your thoughts down below. Am I being too harsh on this book? Do you agree? Have you read it? Do you know who Stephanie Plum is? I still have a bunch of questions after finishing this book. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, even if it is kind of all over the place and a little upset, maybe a lot upset. I hope you'll come back and visit maybe for the next video, which will hopefully be a positive read. You can also find me on Instagram if you like much shorter form reviews, and I will look forward to seeing you guys then. Until next time, happy reading. Bye guys.